A Guide to Growing Oregano, meaning joy, delight of the mountain in ancient Greek. Oregano is a wonderfully fragrant herb used to season a variety of dishes. Pizza, soups, sausages, and meat all benefit from the tasty flavor of oregano. It's also full of healthy antioxidants. Oregano varieties. Greek oregano, the kind most typically sold in the grocery store. It has green, fuzzy leaves, produces white flowers, and has a strong flavor. Greek oregano is also less aggressive in the garden and doesn't take over as much as other varieties do. Mexican oregano. This variety is not as hardy as others, but grows as a perennial in warm southern climates. It grows as a woody shrub and has a strong aroma and flavor, making it a staple spice in many dishes. Italian oregano. This variety is crossed with marjoram and couples its mild sweet flavor with the sharper taste of Greek oregano. Italian oregano grows in upright bushes with green leaves and produces off-white flowers. This variety does not reproduce on its own, so it has to be propagated from cuttings or plant divisions. Oregano prefers direct sun, and it grows best when it's transplanted. It also prefers well-draining soil with a pH between 6.0 and 7.0. Oregano's ideal soil temperature to germinate is between 72 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit, 22 to 25 degrees Celsius. It can tolerate air temperatures as low as 59 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 degrees Celsius. But it can withstand nighttime temperatures of 46 degrees Fahrenheit, 8 degrees Celsius. On the other end of the spectrum, oregano can tolerate air temperatures as high as 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius. Oregano seeds are very small and need sunlight to germinate. Evenly scatter the seeds in indoor starting pots or trays over moistened soil, making sure not to bury them. Remember, they need light. Once the seedlings have emerged, place them by a window that gets plenty of light. Soil preparation. Oregano can spread pretty fast, so it should either be planted in a spot that's out of the way of other crops or grown in containers. Oregano needs to get lots of sun, and its soil should be well-draining, fertile, and have moderate water retention. Turn over the soil to a depth of 8 inches, 20 degrees centimeters, and add organic matter to improve its drainage. Finally, level off the surface and remove any debris and/or rocks. Watering. Be mindful that overwatering oregano can cause root rot. On average, this herb needs about 1 inch, 2.5 centimeters of rain per week. Keep the soil moist but not wet during germination. Then monitor the soil closely and only water oregano when it's dry to the touch. Thinning and trimming. If seeds were directly sown, plants should be thinned to 10 to 12 inches apart when they have at least 3 sets of true leaves. In northern climates, oregano grows as an annual crop outdoors. After the plants set their flowers in autumn, they should be cut 2.5 inches, 6 centimeters from the ground, to prevent them from becoming scraggly and from spreading too much. Propagating and cuttings. Take some stem cuttings that are 2.5 to 5 inches, 7 to 12 centimeters from an early established oregano plant. Remove the leaves from the bottom half of each stem, then place them in a jar of water, making sure that all the leaves are sitting above the water line. Then stick that jar or container in a window that gets a lot of light, but little direct sunlight. Change the water every few days. Once the new roots are about 1 inch long, the little seedlings can then be transplanted into small pots or trays with soil. Dividing plants. First, trim outer edges of the oregano plant. When the soil is still warm, use a large spade to carefully lift the entire root ball. Divide the plant into the desired smaller sizes, either with garden forks or by hand. Get rid of any old, unhealthy sections of the plant. Then prepare another spot in the bed or get containers ready for these divided plants. Fertilizer. Oregano doesn't actually need much fertilizer. Excess nutrients like nitrogen can change the flavor of oregano, so fertilization should be kept to a minimum. Once the seedlings are 3 to 4 weeks old, boost their soil using a half-strength complete houseplant fertilizer. Just follow the instructions on the packaging for application best practices. Mulch. A 1 to 2 inch, 2.5 to 5 centimeter layer of mulch can be applied after transplanting, which will improve moisture retention and keep weed competition to a minimum. Use an organic mulch like grass clippings, straw, or leaves, and keep the mulch away from the stem and base of the plants to avoid rotting diseases. Oregano can be transplanted about 6 to 10 weeks after being seeded indoors. When transplanting to an outdoor garden bed, seedlings will first need to be hardened off. This gets them used to their new, harsher conditions outdoors. At least 1 week before transplanting, move the seedlings outside to a sheltered spot, where they'll be protected from wind, rain, and direct sun. Adjust their position each day so that they're slowly getting exposed to the direct sun. If there's any threat of overnight frost, the seedlings should be brought inside for the night, then taken back out in the morning. Once they're hardened off, space the transplants 10 to 12 inches apart, 25 to 30 centimeters, digging holes just deep enough to contain the root ball. Water these holes to soak the soil. Then loosen the root ball of the transplants and carefully set the plant in its water-soaked hole. Bring the loose soil around each transplant and lightly firm it. Companion plants' do's and don'ts. Plant oregano with bell peppers, hot peppers, and scarlet runner beans. As well, basil is very aromatic and repels common pests of oregano, making them great companions. Great news! There are no plants that negatively impact the growth of oregano, or vice versa. Growing structure options. Oregano can be grown with little fuss. It grows well indoors as well as outdoors from transplants. Most commonly, though, it's grown in containers or raised beds to help contain it, since certain varieties are known to spread. Keep the required 10 to 12 inch, 25 to 30 centimeter spacing in mind when choosing a container, as there may only be room to fit one plant per pot. When starting seeds in small cells, those seedlings may need to be transplanted into 4-inch pots before transplanting outdoors to allow them more time to establish a good root system. Potential pests. Aphids. These tiny pests come in a variety of colors: green, black, red, light orange, or yellow, and mainly feed on the undersides of leaves and stems. What they're actually feeding on is the sap in plants, which ends up causing the plants damage. Aphids also leave behind a sticky substance called honeydew, and they are a pest that's known to spread diseases. Aphids can be tolerated by most plants when their numbers are low, but if there's a lot of aphids, they can stunt a plant's growth and cause a plant's leaves to turn yellow and fall off. Here's what to do. For the most part, plants can handle mild aphid infestations. But if they're found, a strong jet of water from a garden hose will wash them off the plants. Spraying plants with water should be done early in the morning so that the plants can dry off during the day. Sticky traps, neem oil, insecticidal soaps, and horticultural oils are also effective against aphids. Just be sure to follow the application instructions on the packaging. Oftentimes, you can also get rid of aphids by wiping or spraying the leaves with a mild solution of water and a few drops of dish soap. One variation includes adding a pinch of cayenne pepper. Soapy water should be reapplied every 2 to 3 days for about 2 weeks. As well, you can try to attract beneficial insects like lady beetles, hoverflies, and lacewings, all of which are important aphid predators. Make sure to check all transplants for aphids before planting. And keep in mind that aphids aren't very mobile, so it's not uncommon to find one heavily affected plant surrounded by plants that are fine. If this is the case, simply remove and destroy the infected plant. Cutworms. These are gray worms that curl their bodies around the stem of a plant and feed on it, which causes the plant to be cut off just above the soil surface. When their numbers are high, they can cause severe damage to the garden by causing plants to wilt and die off. Cutworms feed at night and hide in plant debris during the day, and they prey more on new transplants, seedlings, or young plants since their stems are more tender. There are a number of different types, but the most common are red-backed, dark-sided, and dingy cutworms. Here's what to do. Hand-pick any cutworms from the plants after dark, when they're most active. Also, keep a 3 to 4 foot buffer of dry soil along the edge of the garden to make it unattractive to cutworms. As well, remove plant residue to help reduce egg-laying sites, and get rid of weeds which can host young cutworm larvae. Be sure to till the garden before planting, which helps to expose and kill any larvae that might be present. Also, use compost instead of green manure, since manure might encourage egg laying. As well, try placing aluminum foil or cardboard collars around the plants to create a barrier, which will stop cutworm larvae from feeding. Simply place the collars around the plants so that one end is pushed a few inches into the soil and the other end is several inches above the ground. Adding a layer of mulch will also help to prevent any cutworms from reaching the soil surface. And natural predators like wasps and ground beetles also help to control cutworm infestations. Finally, try spreading diatomaceous earth, essentially a soft powder made from the bones of tiny aquatic creatures, around the plant's base. This creates a sharp barrier that will keep cutworms out. Leaf miners. Leaf miners are small dark flies with triangular yellow markings that start out as yellow maggots. They feed on the leaves of a plant, creating irregular, round-shaped mines/tunnels on the leaves. These mines/tunnels are long and narrow at first, but eventually will become an irregular-shaped, light-colored patch. This damage can stunt the growth of plants and cause the leaves of plants to turn yellow and drop. In extreme cases, severely infected seedlings can also die off completely. Here's what to do. Monitor plants for signs of these pests, paying close attention to the undersides of leaves. Typically, leaf miners can be removed using a stream of water in the early morning, and certain sprays are good to use too. Natural predators like ladybugs and parasitic wasps can also be attracted to keep leaf miners away. But if these pests are spotted on any plants, simply pick the bugs off and then carefully remove any damaged leaves. Insect netting can also be used to prevent leaf miners from attacking any plants. As well, keep in mind that soils should be plowed under immediately after harvest if any crops were infected with leaf miners. Spider mites. These tiny, spider-like pests are about the size of a grain of pepper and can be red, black, brown, or yellow in color. They feed on plants, sucking on the plant juices and removing chlorophyll, which is important for a plant's ability to turn sunlight into energy. Then, the mites inject toxins into the plants, which causes white dots to appear. Also, affected leaves will become dry and yellow, and those affected leaves can drop from the plant entirely. Oftentimes, there's also some webbing visible on the plant, and the plant's growth can be slowed. Typically, spider mites multiply quickly and thrive in dry and dusty conditions. Here's what to do. Monitor plants for signs of spider mites, paying close attention to the undersides of leaves. Spider mites can sometimes be controlled with a forceful spray of water every other day, and it's best to spray them in the morning hours. That's because when plants are sprayed early in the day, those plants have time to dry off, which avoids bacterial or fungal growth from taking place. Hot pepper wax or insecticidal soap can also get rid of spider mites, Just be mindful that certain sprays can also kill off the natural predators of spider mites. Since these natural predators, like ladybugs, are good bugs to have, they should be encouraged in the garden. Thrips. These are tiny, needle-thin insects that are black, brown, or light yellow in color. Thrips suck the juices of plants while also attacking the leaves and stems. Affected plants will have rough bumps, discolored speckles, or silvering on their leaves. Those leaves can then become distorted, twist, and fall off the plant. As well, thrips can spread many diseases from plant to plant. If the thrip infestation is severe enough, it can kill plants off entirely. Here's what to do. Lots of thrips can be repelled by sheets of aluminum foil that are spread between the rows of plants. Be sure to also remove weeds and debris from the garden bed after frost, and avoid planting next to onions, garlic, or cereals where large numbers of thrips can build up and then transfer onto other crops. Also, use reflective mulches early in the growing season to deter thrips. Spinosad and neem oil can also be used to spot treat heavily infested areas. Finally, release commercially available predators like minute pirate bugs, ladybugs, and lacewings, which are especially effective in greenhouses. For best results, make releases of these predator bugs after first knocking down severe thrips infestations with a spray from the garden hose. Finally, watering plants from above is another effective way to prevent a thrips infestation. Potential diseases and their solutions. Anthracnose. Small water-soaked spots will appear on a plant's leaves, and eventually those spots will get bigger and turn tan or brown in color with a papery texture. This disease thrives in extremely wet weather, and its spores are usually spread by splashing water. It can grow on any part of a plant, except for on the plant's roots. Here's what to do. Plant disease-resistant seeds when possible, and practice good crop rotation. In general, a 3-year rotation is a good place to start. As well, avoid using sprinklers or overhead irrigation, and water plants from their base to keep leaves as dry as possible. As well, seeds can be treated with hot water prior to planting, 122 degrees Fahrenheit or 50 degrees Celsius for 25 minutes. If anthracnose is found on any plants, make sure to destroy and compost the crop residue after harvest. As well, make sure to follow recommended spacing guidelines, since air circulation and ventilation is important for avoiding a lot of diseases. Finally, when planting in containers, it's important to sterilize those containers before use. Damping off. This is one of the most common problems when starting plants from seed. Seedlings will emerge and appear healthy. Then suddenly they'll wilt and die for no obvious reason. Damping off is caused by a fungus that thrives in moist conditions, and when soil and air temperatures are above 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It can also thrive when soils have too much nitrogen fertilizer. This fungus favors slow-growing, deeply seeded plants. The stems of affected plants become water-soaked and will eventually collapse, while roots become too water-soaked and damaged to function. Older plants can also be affected, and either those older plants become stunted or they will collapse. Damping off can be spread 3 different ways, either in water, by contaminated soil, or on gardening equipment. Here's what to do. When possible, plant disease-free seeds. Keep seedlings moist, but avoid overwatering the seedlings to keep the soil from getting too wet. And try to keep the soil from getting too cold. Raised beds are usually a great option for planting, since raised beds help with drainage. Also, avoid over-fertilizing seedlings, and thin the seedlings out to avoid overcrowding, and to make sure the seedlings are getting good air circulation. If containers are being used, Those containers should be thoroughly washed in soapy water and then rinsed in a 10% bleach solution after each use. If any plants are affected with damping off, remove them from the garden and then practice a crop rotation of 2 to 3 years. Mint rust. Small, dusty, bright orange, yellow, or brown pustules, which are raised spots, kind of like pimples, will appear on the undersides of leaves. Eventually, those leaves will turn reddish or brown in color. New shoots might also be pale and distorted, while large areas of leaves will die, causing some of those affected leaves to drop. Here's what to do. Avoid overhead watering. Either use a drip irrigation system or can focus the water stream on the soil rather than on the leaves of the plants. It's also important to water early in the day to avoid having damp soil and plants overnight. Any infected plants and their roots should be removed to prevent the spread of mint rust. Powdery mildew. Small white patches will appear on the upper and lower leaf surfaces, which might also show some purple blotching. Patches often come together to form a dense powdery layer, coating the leaves and causing the leaves to curl inward. In some cases, eventually the leaves will drop from the plant. Typically, the white patches start on the older leaves and then eventually spread to other plant parts. Powdery mildew is brought on by high humidity and moderate temperatures, 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or 16 to 27 degrees Celsius, with symptoms becoming most severe in shaded areas. As well, this disease often acts as an entry point for other pests and diseases. Here's what to do. First, rotate crops so that members of the same family aren't planted in the same spot year after year. In general, a 3-year rotation is a good place to start. Plant disease-resistant varieties when possible, and then provide good air circulation by not crowding the plants and by eliminating weeds. Water plants in the morning to give them enough time to dry out, taking care not to get the plant's leaves wet. Consider spraying infected plants with certain protectant, preventative fungicides. Sulfur, lime sulfur, neem oil, and potassium bicarbonate are all effective. But these remedies will work best when they are used before the infection happens, or when signs of the disease are first spotted. Instead of chemical fungicides, plants can also be sprayed with a bicarbonate solution by simply mixing 1 teaspoon of baking soda in 1 quart of water. Make sure to spray the plants thoroughly, since the solution will only kill fungi that it comes into contact with. Also, potassium bicarbonate, which is similar to baking soda, can actually eliminate powdery mildew once it's there, and does the job fairly quickly. As well, after the growing season, make sure to dispose of any infected leaves or fruit. Once plants are heavily infected with powdery mildew, it's difficult to get rid of the disease, so focus on preventing it from spreading to other plants. Verticulum wilt. A disease causing the yellowing and wilting of lower leaves. Also, V-shaped brown lesions will appear, and the plant's roots and stems will also turn brown. Infected leaves wilt, dry out, and eventually die, while the stems of plants might also turn black near the soil line. In general, verticulum wilt can cause the wilting, stunting, or even the death of plants entirely. The disease is typically spread between plants when infected plant material is physically moved from one spot to another. Here's what to do. Plant high-quality disease-free seeds and avoid planting in areas that were previously infected with verticulum wilt. It's also important to practice crop rotation with non-vulnerable plants. In general, a 3-year crop rotation is a good place to start. As well, make sure plants have enough space in between, since air circulation and ventilation is very important for avoiding disease. Do not over-fertilize or over-water plants. And when watering is done, it's best to do so in the morning to give plants time to dry off during the day. Also, sterilize any containers before use. When there are plants infected with verticillium wilt, be sure to remove and destroy the plants, and also destroy the surrounding soil. It's also important to control weeds around the crops. Water crops regularly, and when possible, provide crops with some afternoon shade. The verticillium wilt fungus can also be rid from the soil by using the solarization process. Simply cover the soil with a tarp, which will heat up the top 6 inches, 15 centimeters of soil, enough to kill the fungus. Harvesting. Oregano is best when harvested just before it sets flowers, but small cuttings can be taken once a plant is about 6 inches tall. Later in the season, as much as 1/3 of top growth of a vigorous plant can be harvested at a time. Allow enough time for regrowth before harvesting again. It's also best to harvest early in the day on a sunny morning when the plants are dry. Storing. Oregano needs to be dried before it's stored. Simply tie the stems of harvested leaves together, then hang them in a dry place out of reach from the sun. Leaves can also be laid out on clean, dry cheesecloth or on a windowsill. Then the leaves should be left to dry in a shaded and dry spot. A third option is to dry oregano in the oven using the lowest setting for 2 to 3 hours. While it's in there, leave the oven door just slightly ajar. Once dehydrated, pulverize the oregano, then store it in a sealed jar in a dry, dark cupboard. Oregano can also be frozen using water or vegetable oil in ice cube trays. For fresh use, strip the leaves off the stem and chop to use immediately, or keep refrigerated to use in the very near future. It won't keep very long.